Observe what happens to an untrained human being the exact moment chaos strikes the room. Their pupils dilate, their vocal pitch shifts upward, their eye movements become erratic, and their upper chest begins taking short, panicked gasps. In a matter of seconds, their central nervous system surrenders total authority to the environment. They become completely readable, completely predictable, and exceptionally easy to manipulate. Most people mistake emotional reactivity for passion, urgency, or strength. In reality, a loss of composure is a submissive behavioral response, a loud, nonverbal declaration that the outside world holds total remote control over your internal state. When you lose your calm, you leak power. You hand the steering wheel of your decision-making over to whoever or whatever generated the pressure. Stoic philosophy was never meant to be passive poetry read in quiet rooms. It was designed as an unyielding psychological operational manual for individuals managing high-stakes volatility, betrayal, and crisis. Calm is not a soft personality trait. Calm is cold, calculated leverage. It is the ability to stand in the eye of a storm while everyone around you disintegrates, maintaining an unshakable, silent baseline that commands the entire space. If you exit this conversation right now, you will continue operating on that same reactive default setting, letting ambient stress, hostile personalities, and unpredictable events dictate your physiology. Stay right here. Over the next few minutes, we will deconstruct 10 cold, high-authority Stoic lessons through the lens of modern behavioral mechanics, giving you the tactical blueprint to install absolute emotional sovereignty over your mind and body. The moment you lose your composure, you execute an immediate downgrade of your situational authority. When an external event triggers an outburst of anger, panic, or defensiveness, your nervous system is acknowledging a threat it cannot process calmly. You begin leaking submissive nonverbal signals: shallow thoracic breathing, erratic hand movements, tense facial microexpressions, and rapid defensive speech. Anyone observing you, whether an adversary, a colleague, or a subordinate, subconsciously recognizes that your internal frame has collapsed. True power does not shout. It does not panic. It sits back, slows its physiological baseline, and analyzes the board with clinical detachment. Calm is the ultimate display of internal dominance. Divide every single variable in your life into two cold categories: variables within your absolute mechanical control and variables outside of it. The untrained mind wastes up to 80% of its daily cognitive bandwidth obsessing over, reacting to, or complaining about external events it cannot alter. This is an inefficient use of brain energy. The Stoic operator ruthlessly purges external variables from their emotional matrix. The weather, other people's opinions, past mistakes, and market shifts are treated as neutral environmental background noise. Your focus remains locked exclusively on your internal state, your nonverbal output, and your immediate physical execution. Between an external trigger and your physical reaction, there exists a brief, highly critical microsecond window. A weak operator allows the stimulus to trigger an immediate, automated emotional response. A high-authority operator steps inside that microsecond gap and freezes it. An insult, a crisis, or a sudden failure carries zero emotional charge until your brain assigns meaning to it. When an aggressive input hits your system, deploy an immediate physical interrupt. Hold your breath for 1 second, freeze your visual focus, and refuse to give the input an emotional label. You do not react, you execute. Panic is simply the brain encountering an unexpected variable it has not pre-processed. The Stoic practice of premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, is an advanced stress-hardening technique. Every morning, run a cold, clinical pre-mortem on your day. Systematically visualize your plans collapsing, key individuals betraying your trust, and severe technical disruptions occurring. By walking your nervous system through these scenarios in a controlled state, you strip them of their shock value. When crisis hits the real world, your brain does not register panic. It registers a scenario it has already solved. You cannot achieve mental calm if your physical hardware is broadcasting chaotic signals to your brain. Your mind and body exist in a continuous feedback loop. When stress hits, your body instinctively wants to fidget, pace, or shorten its breath. Override this impulse with rigid physical stillness. Ground your feet flat against the floor, drop your shoulders, expand your diaphragm, and eliminate all unnecessary micro-movements. By enforcing total physical stillness on the outside, you send a non-negotiable neural signal to your brain that you are in complete command of the room. Events do not harm you. Your subjective commentary about those events harms you. When a project fails, the objective reality is simply that a specific set of actions produced a specific physical result. The drama, anger, and self-pity you feel are artificial layerings added by your ungoverned mind. Train yourself to speak and think in raw, unadorned facts. Strip away words like disaster, unfair, or catastrophe. Describe reality with cold, surgical precision. When you eliminate dramatic narratives from your vocabulary, emotional volatility vanishes along with them. The tactical supremacy of emotional stillness represents a deliberate, high-authority posture engineered to strip control from volatile environments and unpredictable external operators. Most human beings view calmness as a soft, passive trait, a state of mild indifference that occurs naturally when life is quiet. In behavioral mechanics and high-stakes social dynamics, this interpretation is fundamentally flawed. True emotional stillness is not the absence of energy. It is the absolute containment and precise direction of it. It is an aggressive, calculated stance designed to preserve your cognitive bandwidth while forcing everyone around you to reveal their hand. When you maintain an unshakable, motionless baseline amidst chaos, you withhold the emotional reactions that others rely on to read, manipulate, or destabilize your frame. In any high-tension interaction, the individual who loses composure first surrenders the situational upper hand. Emotional outbursts, quick defensive retorts, and visible agitation are micro-expressions of internal panic. They signal to observers that your central nervous system has reached its processing limit and is now operating in a reactive, submissive mode. When an adversary, a hostile colleague, or a high-stress crisis attempts to pressure you, they are explicitly hunting for an emotional response. They want you to justify yourself, raise your voice, or display anxiety, because those reactions create friction and entry points for exploitation. By deploying immediate, stone-like emotional stillness, you deny them that leverage entirely. You create an eerie psychological void that forces the opposing party to overextend, overexplain, and ultimately collapse under the weight of their own unreciprocated intensity. Furthermore, emotional stillness preserves your internal processing power at the exact moment you need it most. When panic or anger takes over, your brain floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline, narrowing your perceptual field and forcing you into binary fight or flight thinking. You lose the ability to analyze complex variables, spot hidden strategic advantages, or execute calculated countermeasures. Calmness acts as a neural buffer, preventing your limbic system from hijacking your executive functions. By keeping your heart rate steady and your mind quiet, you process environmental data with surgical clarity. You see the room for what it actually is, uncolored by personal offense, fear, or ego, allowing you to execute high-leverage decisions while those around you are blinded by their own emotional turbulence. This internal stillness directly dictates your nonverbal presence, transforming your physical hardware into a beacon of baseline authority. An operator who commands their own emotional state moves with deliberate slowness, holds steady eye focus, and eliminates all nervous, micro-fidgeting gestures. This absence of erratic physical output broadcasts an unspoken message of complete internal certainty. Human beings are hardwired to look to the calmest person in the room during a crisis, assuming that their lack of panic stems from superior knowledge, power, or preparation. By embodying total physical and emotional stillness, you passively assume control over the collective state of the room, compelling others to adjust their pitch, speed, and behavior to match your steady frequency. Mastering this discipline requires you to treat calmness not as a feeling, but as a strict operational protocol. You train yourself to view sudden chaos, aggressive behavior, or unexpected failure as raw data rather than personal attacks. The second an environmental trigger occurs, your immediate objective is not to solve the problem instantly or defend your ego, but to freeze your physiological reaction. You hold your posture, control your breathing, and let the initial wave of environmental noise break against your silence. By adopting this cold, tactical stance, you transform emotional composure into an offensive weapon, ensuring that no matter how volatile the world becomes around you, your internal sovereignty remains completely untouched. De-escalation through nonverbal dominance is the strategic application of physiological control to neutralize tension, reset power dynamics, and establish immediate situational authority. When conflicts, confrontations, or high-pressure situations arise, most people instinctively attempt to regain control using verbal force, raising their pitch, speaking faster, or layering their words with aggressive justification. In high-stakes human interaction, this verbal escalation is an immediate signal of internal panic and defensive vulnerability. True dominance in a high-tension room is never loud, rushed, or defensive. It is quiet, slow, and biologically anchored. By taking absolute command over your non-verbal hardware, you force the central nervous systems of those around you to down-regulate and submissively align with your controlled frequency. The core of nonverbal dominance begins with the deliberate management of your respiratory baseline and involuntary physiological outputs. In a crisis or confrontation, the human body instinctively shifts into a fight or flight state, resulting in rapid thoracic breathing, elevated heart rates, and subtle physical tremors. When you allow these physiological changes to occur, they leak microsignals of stress into the environment, signaling to onlookers that your frame has been compromised. To counter this, you must execute an immediate somatic lock. Slow your breathing down to a deep diaphragmatic cadence, expand your chest, and ground your physical posture firmly into the floor. This conscious physiological control actively suppresses your adrenaline response, keeping your mind sharp while broadcasting an undeniable aura of absolute internal stability. Facial control and visual focus are equally critical components in establishing nonverbal authority during intense interactions. An untrained individual reacting to stress displays rapid eye movements, excessive blinking, and micro-expressions of anxiety, anger, or confusion. To project unshakable composure, you must completely freeze unnecessary facial micro-movements and lock your gaze with calm, unblinking intensity. This visual stillness deprives the other party of feedback. They can no longer read your thoughts, gauge your emotional state, or determine whether their pressure tactics are working. This complete absence of emotional leakage creates a psychological vacuum that unsettles the opposing party, forcing them to doubt their own position and second-guess their aggressive approach. The dichotomy of control as an operational filter is a cold, tactical mechanism designed to purge low-leverage variables from your field of awareness, protecting your cognitive bandwidth from systemic depletion. The vast majority of human beings burn through massive amounts of daily mental energy, reacting to, obsessing over, and emotionally agonizing about circumstances they possess zero mechanical power to change. They allow their internal state to be hijacked by external noise, market fluctuations, ambient social opinions, weather patterns, and the unpredictable, chaotic behavior of other people. From a strategic perspective, this uncurated absorption of external inputs represents a catastrophic failure of self-governance, leaving your central nervous system perpetually exhausted, emotionally volatile, and completely incapable of sustained, high-level execution. To install the dichotomy of control as a functional operational filter, you must divide every single input hitting your awareness into two non-negotiable categories: variables under your direct, real-time command, and variables completely outside of it. The first category is small, tight, and absolute, consisting exclusively of your internal standards, your nonverbal output, your physical posture, your emotional interpretation, and your immediate physical actions. The second category contains literally everything else in the universe. A high authority operator applies this filter with clinical ruthlessness, treating everything in the second category as neutral, unalterable background noise that warrants zero emotional investment, zero verbal complaint, and zero cognitive processing power. When an unexpected disaster, a sudden betrayal, or a massive environmental shift occurs, the untrained mind experiences a surge of panic, anger, or moral indignation, asking useless, disempowering questions like why this happened or how unfair the situation is. An operator utilizing the Stoic filter bypasses this emotional trap entirely. They strip the event of all moral drama and view it through a lens of raw, unadorned operational data. The event simply is what it is, an unalterable fact of reality that has already occurred. The only variable that carries any strategic weight is how you choose to manipulate your own physical hardware and execute your next move in response to that new baseline reality. Perceptual decoupling from external stimuli is the advanced psychological skill of severing the automatic link between an outside event and your internal emotional reaction. Most human beings live in a state of continuous psychological servitude, operating like basic reflex machines that react instantly to whatever input hits their senses. When someone hurls an insult, an unexpected crisis occurs, or plans fall apart, their central nervous system immediately surges with anger, fear, or panic. They naively believe that the external event directly caused their emotional distress, completely unaware that an event carries zero intrinsic emotional charge. In behavioral mechanics, an event is merely a set of raw, neutral, physical data points. The emotional volatility you experience is entirely manufactured by your own subconscious interpretation of that data. Between an external stimulus and your physical reaction, there exists a microsecond gap in which your brain assigns meaning, narrative, and value to what just transpired. The untrained mind speeds through this gap in a fraction of a millisecond, allowing automated evolutionary scripts and fragile ego defenses to hijack the nervous system. Perceptual decoupling requires you to step directly inside that microsecond window and expand it, creating a thick, impenetrable buffer zone between the outside world and your internal state. When a hostile or chaotic stimulus enters your field of awareness, you do not allow your brain to immediately process it as an offense, a threat, or a disaster. Instead, you freeze the input at the perimeter of your mind, treating it as unverified, raw data that requires cold, clinical evaluation before any emotional clearance is granted. Achieving this level of cognitive insulation demands that you train your mind to strip every incoming event of its dramatic narrative and view it in its most basic, objective form. When an adversary attacks your character, the raw reality is simply that acoustic sound waves are traveling through the air and hitting your eardrums. When a critical project fails, the raw reality is merely that a specific combination of physical actions produced an unintended outcome. The feelings of betrayal, shame, or despair are artificial layers that your ungoverned mind aggressively attaches to the event. By practicing radical objectivity, you systematically strip away these subjective overlays, observing the world with the cool, detached precision of a strategist watching pieces move across a physical board. This perceptual separation transforms your physical body from a reactive target into an impenetrable fortress of situational authority. When an individual attempts to provoke, intimidate, or anger you, they are explicitly trying to force your nervous system to match their emotional frequency. If you react with defensiveness, raised voices, or visible anxiety, you confirm that their input successfully breached your perimeter and altered your internal baseline. By deploying perceptual decoupling, you remain entirely motionless, holding your posture, steadying your eyes, and maintaining a slow, diaphragmatic breathing rhythm. Your complete refusal to absorb their emotional charge creates an unsettling vacuum that strips the attacker of their leverage, forcing them to confront the silent, unyielding wall of your composure. Mastering this psychological decoupling elevates your operational efficiency to an elite, sovereign standard. You cease being a victim of ambient circumstances, hostile personalities, or sudden environmental shocks, becoming instead an unshakable operator who dictates their own state regardless of external pressure. You no longer waste finite cognitive bandwidth or neurochemical energy recovering from emotional spikes because you simply refuse to generate them in the first place. By systematically intercepting every stimulus before it can trigger an automated response, you maintain an uninterrupted baseline of quiet focus, sharp strategic clarity, and absolute authority over your internal world. Pre-mortem inoculation and stress hardening represent the deliberate, systematic practice of desensitizing your central nervous system to panic by exposing your mind to controlled, worst-case scenarios before they manifest in reality. The average individual operates under a fragile cloud of optimistic denial, moving through their day with the passive hope that everything will go smoothly and everyone will cooperate. When an unexpected crisis inevitably shatters this fragile expectation, their uninoculated nervous system experiences a severe shock, triggering an immediate flood of cortisol, rapid thoracic breathing, and cognitive paralysis. In high-stakes environments, this paralysis is catastrophic. A high-authority operator does not rely on hope or assume favorable conditions. They actively train their brain to process chaos, betrayal, and failure in advance, stripping crisis of its ability to produce surprise or panic. The core operational mechanism of pre-mortem inoculation is the Stoic discipline of premeditatio malorum, the calculated premeditation of evils. Every morning, before stepping into high-pressure environments or executing complex initiatives, you conduct a cold, clinical audit of every potential failure point. You do not engage in vague, fearful worrying. You perform a surgical, step-by-step mental simulation of your plans collapsing. You visualize key team members failing to perform, vital technology malfunctioning, hostile adversaries launching unexpected attacks, and your most critical objectives dissolving into complete disarray. By running these mental simulations in a controlled, physically relaxed state, you force your brain to process the physiological impact of failure beforehand, systematically eroding its shock value and building neural pathways for immediate problem solving. This deliberate exposure acts as a form of psychological vaccination, building an impenetrable layer of stress hardening across your entire central nervous system. When an individual encounters a crisis they have never mentally rehearsed, their brain perceives the situation as an unprecedented threat to survival, locking their executive functions into a primitive fight or flight response. However, when you have already walked your mind through that exact failure state dozens of times during your morning audit, the real-world occurrence no longer registers as a terrifying anomaly. Your brain recognizes the pattern instantly, bypassing the panic response entirely and accessing the cold, pre-scripted tactical contingency plans you established during your simulation. Where others see a shocking disaster, your desensitized mind sees a familiar problem set that simply requires mechanical execution. Furthermore, this stress hardening protocol directly elevates your nonverbal posture and physical presence during real-time emergencies. Because your nervous system has already processed the emotional weight of worst-case outcomes, your physical hardware remains remarkably quiet when chaos strikes the room. While those around you display erratic eye movements, elevated vocal pitch, and collapsed body language, your heart rate remains steady, your posture stays grounded, and your voice retains its slow, resonant cadence. This absence of panic is not a mask or a performance. It is the natural byproduct of a mind that has already confronted total failure and stripped it of its terror. Your unshakable physical composure acts as a massive anchor in the space, signaling to everyone present that you hold total situational command.